How many times has your mind just gone blank when you attempt to describe a scene? Or you get so into the details only to realize that most of your fellow players have stopped paying attention? Well, one of the best tips I can give you as a player or a DM to avoid these dangers of description is to leave gaps. You can leave gaps in the information by just sticking to the essential elements of that scene, what you perceive to be the core pieces that your fellow players need to understand to get a sense of what's going on. And just keeping it simple is really easy. You walk into a blacksmith shop. Everybody playing a fantasy game has some idea of what that blacksmith shop looks like without you saying another word. But you can also leave gaps in your physical speech, just a moment of silence, to build the tension, to actually scan your players' faces to see if they're still interested, and to let them fill that time or that space with their own ideas. So in this video, we're going to expand on that tip and cover 4 more easy ways that you can use description to bring your game to life instead of killing it. But if you would rather leave descriptions to the professionals, check out our lovely returning sponsor, dScryb. dScryb is a cultivated collection of scenes for places, monsters, spells, and more categories on the way, with new descriptions added all the time. They're easy to search on the fly when your players surprise you, and easy to save during your game prep, saving you time. Join for free through the link below so they know who sent you, or unlock more scenes through the coupon code BOB to save 10% and start your next adventure with dScryb. Hi, I'm Bob. This is my sick new animated intro thingy, and this is where we learn how to have more fun playing D&D together. So leaving gaps in your descriptions is a great way to help you avoid overdoing it. As a fan of Critical Role, Matt Mercer is known to be a freaking genius for just improvising a scene totally off the bat and really bringing it to life with rich sensory detail. And by the end of this video, you're going to feel more confident giving those rich immersive details. But just know that at least for me, and I assume many others, sometimes Matt seems to go on for a little bit too long. Just keeping it simple takes a ton of pressure off of you as a DM. 1, if you're thinking you need to emulate that style, because you totally don't, but 2, because it's just information overload for your players most of the time. And you don't want to be that one player whose turn in combat takes like 5 minutes, because even if you know all your abilities really well, you just love to get into the nitty-gritty on every single attack. And so for players and DMs, really considering the amount of information you need to deliver to get your point across is crucial. It not only saves you prep time, but it keeps you from spilling too much information too early, and will make you more confident in your delivery of clues, whether that be about the secret of your player character that you don't want to reveal until later in the campaign, or of those clues that will link your players to the bad guy potentially too early if you go overboard and start spinning into the details that you wanted to hold on for longer. And this is also why leaving pauses in your speech can be really helpful. Take a breath, really think about, oops, was that too much information? Or, hey, is this enough information for them to figure out what I need them to next? And you can scan your fellow players around the table to really see who likes these details, who finds it boring, and maybe give them an opportunity to jump in and actually engage with the scene. Those pauses serve as the perfect passive invitation for collaboration. The more you leave out, the more the group will fill in. So point number 2 is to call on your fellow players to take an active role in describing the world beyond just their character. Asking for little details about an NPC or a monster prevents boredom and gives them a stake in the world building. But this shouldn't just come from the DM. If you're a player, ask your fellow players for details every now and then. When you're all participating, you form this imagination mastermind that is far more powerful than the sum of its parts. And some of you might remember that I gave this tip in my video about how to keep your players' attention during a session. And you'll also remember that one of the potential dangers of description here is that some players who think they're very comedically inclined will make some silly names or silly descriptions that may become part of the world. So players, don't abuse this opportunity, but DMs, lean into it every now and then, because those elements of the world will be the most memorable for that group because they really feel ownership of it, even if it's kind of a joke. And another crossover tip from that video is to focus on the action and even perform a little bit if you feel like it. This can be so crucial for online D&D when we're all just zombified staring at a screen for way too long, but even in your descriptions, always be thinking about the movement, its speed, its direction, its cadence, and how you can use those details to bring it to life. Of course, this makes a lot of sense for combat, but you can even use this to describe an NPC coming down the street towards your characters, or a scene in nature where they get to observe some wildlife. And whether or not you feel like you struggle to find the right words in your descriptions, I encourage you to read more. I'm sure you've heard this one before, so I'm kind of lumping it in with a bonus tip to really make sure you get your bang for your buck on this one. And the bonus tip here is that they say one of these things is worth 1,000 words. But you know what else is worth 1,000 words? Like 5 words. Remember tip number 1, keep it simple. Because seriously, be very selective with your terrain or visuals that you use in your game, because I'm kind of on the side of believing that they can kill the imagination rather than help it along. Once you show that map, everybody has the same image of the room with these same 3 barrels in the corner and door by the other side with a little window next to it, and there's very little room to improvise from there on. Now, if you didn't plan for those barrels to be there, maybe they are helpful, because one of your more creative players might think, oh, we can use that for cover, or hey, I wonder what's inside. But just from a game preparation perspective, it's way easier to skip the visuals and stick with theater of mind. That's my style. And part of the reason I don't like using visuals is because vision is probably the most vanilla of our senses when it comes to D&D descriptions. So yes, you should always be talking about movement and always thinking about a light source in a room, and maybe how it can play off everything in it and what colors are created. But what you cannot display on any map or terrain piece is the smell coming from those barrels, or the taste and texture of its contents and the sound coming down the hallway. This is the difference between you walk into the blacksmith shop and as you walk into the workshop area, you feel the rush of heat from the furnace and now the sharp pinging in your ears of the rhythmic hammer. And actually, another sense that comes up here that you should always be leaning into is the temperature. Whether it's really hot or really cold or somewhere in between, or really humid outside or really dry air that's choking you. These extra senses of temperature, humidity, pressure, and pain are really things we need to be leaning into to bring our worlds to life. So excite the senses, focus on the action, call on the players, leave gaps, and check out our sponsor dScryb to take care of all of that for you. Please give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful, and consider subscribing and joining Patreon like Ken, Lee, Jason, Tom, David, Nicholas, Robert, Chris, Duncan, David, and Juliana just did. Thank you for your support, and keep building.